Hello everybody, welcome to another video. This one is kind of funny because I wasn't actually going to do a video on these. I picked these up a while ago on Facebook Marketplace and my intention was to just do a quick flip. Dust them off, clean them out, maybe give them a little polish, but that was all my intention was. But it had been so long since I purchased these that when I went to look at them again, I noticed a lot of issues. The finish here along the front had completely worn off. You can see where it's glossy and where it's not. That's raw wood at the front. There are a few scratches, some stains. But the biggest issue with these two pieces is the finish. The finish is failing everywhere. You can see it flaking pretty badly on the top here. But the worst is the side of the tall one. I don't know what happened. My guess is that this was facing a window because it looks like it's been completely sunbaked. Even the drawers, and I know this is a little bit hard to show through a camera, the texture of the finish is extremely rough and almost like there's little ridges everywhere. The only option here is to strip this down and refinish it. My name is Angie and I refinish furniture. Sometimes I paint and sometimes I don't, but I always do what I can to save old pieces from the trash. Welcome to my workroom. Now, with almost every video I do like this, there's always a few people that say, oh, you should have just added some oil, buffed it in, wiped it off. Or more recently, I've had a few people suggest something like Howard Restore Finish. And there's a reason I don't use Restore Finish, and no judgment against anyone who does, because it can work really well in some situations, but I'm going to tell you why it doesn't really work for me. If you have a piece that is in relatively good condition but just has a few light surface scratches, by all means Restore Finish is great for that. If you want to refresh the inside of a cabinet, for example, totally fine. If you're working on a piece like this where the finish is incredibly damaged and failing and you've got areas of raw wood, I don't recommend using it for that, and the main reason is some of the oils that are in it. Mineral oil in particular is a non-drying oil, and if some of that penetrates into the raw wood and the rest is on the surface of the old finish that is still intact, the part that goes into the wood can actually permanently stain it and make it way more difficult to refinish down the road. The other reason I don't like to use it is because the results are temporary. You will need to do some maintenance every 6 months to a year on average. And honestly, it's just not as good as refinishing and applying a brand new finish. Again, like I said, if you have something that just has some minor surface scratches, totally fine for that. Anyway, that's my bit on Howard Restore Finish. So back to the task at hand here. This is a really cool shot, and the main reason is as I'm scraping this finish off, you can actually see the different layers. So here we've got the raw walnut veneer. This is actually the seal coat, and this is the tinted lacquer that they used on top. It's a little bit like archaeology. You uncover the layers as you go. Here you can see I just scraped the toned finish off, and then I can go back in and get the seal coat off. One question I get asked a lot is why I choose to scrape versus stripping. And honestly, it really just depends on what I'm working on. Most of this finish is failing and is quite easy to remove, but you will see later on there is a section that I do have to strip. These drawers are solid wood with a veneer face, and the handle is solid wood and it is very firmly attached. There's no way to take it off, so I'm going to have to refinish these drawers with the handle still on it, just by carefully scraping it with my carbide scraper. And I'll get as close to the handle as I can with this one, and you'll see in a little bit I'll come in with a more detailed scraper to get right up to the handle. I'm using the same scraper on the handle itself, but obviously as I get to the lower part, I want to be very careful that I'm not accidentally gouging the drawer face. Sometimes I'll hold my finger there in such a way that it actually won't allow the scraper to touch the other surface, because that would definitely be a bad day for me. On the drawers that have these little brass inlays, and again like the feet and the leg tips, it's not solid brass. The way the scraper is shaped though, I can go right up to it, so that's great. Almost all of the finish on these two pieces came off very easily, except for this panel here on the left, and it's actually the right side of the lower dresser. It's the only one that still has perfect factory finish on it. Compare that to the right side here, which I could probably do single-handed and with almost no pressure. I did start to scrape it, but it was a little bit difficult to get through, so I'm using a chemical stripper. I like circa 1850, it works well for me, and this will just help me get through this side pretty quickly. This is the worst side of both pieces. This is the one where the finish was literally just flaking right off. Now this is the little scraper that I'm using to get in underneath. I promise you I'm not scratching the wood, it's just the finish coming off. Thankfully even the finish here was a bit fragile, so it was quite easy to take off. Now keep in mind that when I say easy, I literally mean not difficult, but I definitely don't mean not time consuming. I believe at this point I was on day 2 or possibly even 3 of scraping and stripping and sanding these pieces. Definitely not the quick flip and sale that I was expecting, but that happens sometimes. To be honest, I could have sold them as is. It just then would have become someone else's problem, and I just wanted to make sure that these 2 beautiful pieces were repaired and preserved and ready to live the next 50 or 60 years of their lives. I actually only sanded these with 1 grit. This is a 220 grit. Once the finish came off, there was very little to actually sand, and because it's veneer I wanted to use a fairly high grit, and then I just hand sanded up against the details like the brass inlays. The 220 on my Dewalt was more than enough to get rid of any residual finish or color and left it nice and smooth and ready for sealing. Now part of the frame is actually elm, and I think there's another type of wood as well, but the point is there are parts that will have to be stained because when I add the clear coat to the walnut, it's really going to deepen and will be a totally different color than the frame and the legs. And you can really see here just how damaged this side was. I don't know if it was moisture or it looks like sun damage, honestly, because part of the wood is actually bleached. I'm not sure what's going to happen when I put a clear coat on. I'm a little bit worried that this side might be a bit lighter, but I guess we'll have to see. Once all the old finish is off and everything is sanded down, I can really get a good look at this crazy grain. And you can see a bit of a difference here on these sides from the low dresser to the tall dresser. The low dresser has a little bit of a redder finish, and I don't know yet if that's going to be a problem. We're going to find out. There are numerous finishes I could use on these pieces. On the last mid-century set, I went with traditional lacquer. On this one, I'm going to go with Odie's oil. I really love using Odie's on raw walnut especially, but I find it really depends on the tone of the walnut. Walnut can range from almost greenish brown to a very rich red brown, and I have no idea what these are going to look like until I put this on. There are a lot of people that sort of balk at Odie's and they think of it as almost like a Danish oil or a hemp oil, and it's not like any of those. Odie's actually has a tung oil base, which is one of the most durable finishes you can get. It's a bit of work to put on, it's especially when you've got 2 pieces like this with multiple drawers. My arms were killing me by the end of it. But I absolutely love how Odie's brings out the wood. We have several pieces in our home that are finished with Odie's and we've never had a problem. It's just fabulous at bringing out the natural color of the wood. And I was a bit surprised actually how red or reddish orange this walnut is. And actually Andrea happened to walk in and she said, "Oh my gosh, what color did you stain that?" I said, "This is no stain. This is the color of this particular walnut." And when you look at what this set looked like originally with that sort of muted, almost blonde look, it's almost sad to me that it was covered up. So there's a bit of a feud with the mid-century purists when it comes to this type of finish, because most of these pieces were done with lacquers and toners, and you know, for some people that's how they expect these pieces to be redone, and I totally get that and I respect that. But for me personally, this is literally what the wood looks like. It is what the wood is, and I don't like covering it up unless for some reason I have to, or if I think that the color on a piece is off and it just needs to be tweaked. This is really what I prefer to do. I just wanted to say a quick but big thank you to all of you who have supported me in my journey so far. Whether it's liking and sharing and commenting on my videos, giving me encouragement when things don't go as planned, folks who have sent me things from the Amazon wish list or buy me a coffee. I literally can't do this without your help and support, so a huge thank you from the bottom of my heart. I appreciate each and every one of you. Once the Odie has sat for an appropriate amount of time, it's time to go and remove it all. This is a really important part of the Odie's process, and you can see here in this shot, or at least I hope you can, until you start buffing it, like I'm doing here, it looks a little bit patchy and kind of weird. It's really when you go in and start buffing it off that you get that smooth, buttery look. And quite often when I hear people having issues with Odies, it's because there's something wrong with this step. They're not buffing it off enough, or they apply too much so it makes it harder to buff it off. You really want to go really easy with Odies and remove all that hasn't soaked into the wood. So here's the side by side of those two panels. There is a bit of a difference, but there's also a grain difference, so I'm not overly worried about it. I unfortunately didn't get footage of me sanding the legs down, but I did, and then I taped and sprayed the feet. And the reason I did is because they were only brass plated. Some of them had rust and most of them had tarnish, so it's just going to give this a nice fresh look. As I mentioned earlier, the legs and the drawer faces behind the walnut veneer are a different type of wood, so I need to stain them and try to get them as close to the walnut color as possible. I felt like candlelight would give me enough of that reddish hue, and I know it looks very dark as it's going on here, but wait till you see me wipe it back. It's pretty close. It's close enough for me. So I'm just going to keep going and finish all of the drawer trim here and the sides as well. The side of the drawer face, not the side of the drawers. And then I'm going to add the same stain to the legs. I also needed to stain the parts of the frame that were elm and whatever the other type of wood is, maybe ash. And again, my goal here is just to get this as close as possible. Having the natural variations in the wood tone elsewhere on the piece by using the Odie's oil makes this part a little bit easier because it doesn't have to be a perfect match. There are many different tones going on in this piece, and as long as it's close to one of them, I'm happy. I just wanted to show you how big Nacho's getting. Clearly, this is not the correct way to measure a cat, but I thought it was kind of cute. Thought I would put it in. You'll actually see Nacho in a clip a little bit later. Now I needed to find a toner that would work well here. Obviously the one on the right was a little bit too green, the one in the middle was a little bit too cherry, and the one here on the left is perfect. So that color is Medium Brown Walnut by Mohawk. All I did was give them a very light coat and it ended up roughly where I wanted it to be. Now I've never used Odie's over toner. I was a little bit worried the color would lift, but I thought I'd give it a try, and I was quite relieved to see that there was no color lift at all, so that was great. After I finished with the legs, I actually went and did a second Odie's oil coat on both pieces. The wood initially was just so dry that I thought a second coat wouldn't hurt. Now this is the hardware, and you can see it's not in the best shape. It's also plated, it also has some rust and some tarnish. This is what it looks like after cleaning it up with a slightly abrasive pad, and I'm going to be spraying these to match the feet. There are some folks that don't agree with spraying hardware, sometimes you have to. There is no amount of polish that is going to bring back the original color of these because the color is completely worn off. I do know that there's a way that you can actually brass plate and copper plate your own hardware at home. It's a bit of a process, it's a little bit too complicated for me, and to be honest, I've had really good luck with this particular spray paint, so that's what I'm choosing to do here. The last piece of this giant puzzle, I believe this is day 4 or 5. This took a long time to do, guys. That's the interior of the drawers. Some of them have pencil marks and scrapes and scratches. They've already been cleaned and scrubbed out, but they need a little extra attention. So I'm just lightly sanding them off. I'm trying not to sand off the original writing, which is, it tells you where the drawers go. It's not a huge deal, but I like to preserve those little bits where possible. Like, that was actually handwritten by the people that built this. And I'm just using some Howard feed and wax to nourish these drawer bottoms. The bottoms themselves are actually mahogany plywood, so on the interior at least it looks absolutely beautiful. Mahogany is a gorgeous wood and it just has a high-end feel to it. Finally, it is time to reattach the hardware. I'm super excited to show you how these turned out, but first, you guys are always asking for more Rescue Bunny intermissions, so this one's a little bit special because Nacho is meeting the bunnies for the first time. Okay, time for a trip down memory lane. I'll show you what these pieces looked like initially. And like I said in the beginning, from afar, there doesn't look like there is anything wrong with these. But once you get up close, you could start to see the issues, and I just couldn't in good conscience sell these like this. To preserve them in the long run, they absolutely had to be refinished. Again, I am not a huge fan of the toned finish that they used on these. It sort of muted everything and you couldn't see that incredible wood grain. So I'm really happy that I took these in and gave them my treatment because now the walnut really shines and I'm so excited to show them to you. So thank you so much for watching and enjoy the reveal.